I went to the dentist once, and the dentist was like, "What have you been chewing on? Because your teeth are silver." And I'm like, "Oh, you know what that is a pop tab." But if I have a can, I used to drink those clear Americans in cans all the time, and I would pull the pop tab off, and it just subconsciously didn't even realize I was doing it. But I was doing it enough that it was like rubbing off on my teeth, so I had to stop drinking out of cans, like pretty much altogether.
I feel like there is a very clear like maybe middle ground that you could find there as far as between I can't drink out of cans anymore because I'm chewing the bottle tabs.
Ooh, you didn't tell me you were a brainiac.
Welcome into LeatherBrainz, your host, Slabdog, here for episode 196. 200 is quickly approaching. Oh. Today, I have my good friend Scotty Del Rey. It's just Scotty and I today, and we are going to be discussing all things NFL. Scotty, yes. Let's go ahead and reach for our Scooby snacks for the disappointment that is the Cardinals' loss this week. So I got mine. You got one?
Like pour one out for the homies situation.
Yeah, but that's exactly what we're doing. So here we go.
That was like communion. No disrespect to my Catholic friends. I'm Catholic also, but it was kind of like communion.
Also, if you're under the age of 18, do not do what we just did. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. Week 6 is in the books, and we had Will Levis breaking a ball boy's leg, Nick Sirianni fighting his own fans at home, which was absolutely hilarious, and Joe Burrow had more yards on one rush than Dak Prescott's entire passer rating this week. But before we get into the NFL conversation, we have to give a shout out to our sponsor, Erica's Healthy Pet. Whether it's beef jerky, cheesy bites, or the liver chews that smell oh so terrible, but my dogs love dearly, go check out Erica's Healthy Pet for all of your dog or cat's treat needs. Not only that, they don't have just treats, they have topical solutions, and they have other varying pet products that you will thoroughly enjoy, or not you, but your loved animal will thoroughly enjoy. Go check out ericashealthypet.com and use code LB20 for 20% off of your order. Once again, ericashealthypet.com, code LB20, 20% off for all of you that, all you dirty old nasty brainiacs that enjoy the show. That is a great way to support us. Genuinely appreciate it. Once again, ericashealthypet.com, code LB20, 20%.
Wait, hold on. I want to give my own little shout out to Erica's Healthy Pet because Erica saved my ass recently because one of my dogs was a little sickly and he threw up a couple times, and then for like 3 days he wasn't eating. And it was like a real problem. I was actually concerned about him. I got those little beef sprinkles, the ones that I ate on air.
Yeah.
And you put a little bit of those in his food, and he was like not touching his food at all for several days. He immediately started eating, was immediately better. Like immediately. It was crazy how much of a difference it made. And those sprinkles enticed him just enough to start eating and get back on track. So Erica saved my ass because I was done cleaning up dog puke out of my house.
She's a miracle worker, and she provides
Amen.
beef sprinkles for your dogs to love. Erica's Healthy Pet, code LB20, 20% off. Love you guys. All right, let's go over to the 49ers, Scotty, because apparently they have an unlimited supply of running backs at their disposal. 49ers beat the Seahawks 36-24, and it was not Christian McCaffrey. It was not Elijah Mitchell. It was not Jordan Mason, but Isaac Guerendo, who logged 10 carries. What?
That's pretty good. I don't know how to say Guerendo? Guerendo? I don't know. I think you put too many syllables in there, but it's close enough. Isaac, all respect to you. We just don't know how to pronounce your name. We're idiots. It's not your fault.
Yeah. But, hey, he got 9.9 yards per carry, man. And he looked really great. But I would like to – he's the fourth-string running back on this team. So they just keep coming. It doesn't matter if Christian McCaffrey's not around.
When I drafted Christian McCaffrey and then also picked up Elijah Mitchell in our Dynasty League, I was thinking, yeah, I'm set. No problem. I know Christian McCaffrey's got that injury history, but guess what? I got the backup on a great offense. Turns out you need to keep digging. You got to dig in that depth chart to make sure you're secure in this 49ers team because they all just get injured all the time.
Yeah, no, you have to roster the entire running back room for the 49ers.
It'll take up your whole roster, though, because there's 17 of them.
But when you play one of them, you're going to get like a guaranteed 10 points minimum. So you do the math. Latest injury news on the 49ers, though. Christian McCaffrey will not return to practice for Week 7 per Kyle Shanahan, so he's still out. Jordan Mason left this game with a sprained AC joint and is officially day-to-day. So there is a very good chance that Isaac Guerendo is probably, I think he probably is number 3 on the depth chart over Elijah Mitchell at this point.
Well, Elijah Mitchell's on IR. That's why he's not there. So CMC's out. Elijah Mitchell's on IR. Jordan Mason's injured. So Isaac, I think, he's going to get a lot of carries. Although they just throw Debo in there every now and again. It's still kind of a mixed bag. But whoever's in the backfield is guaranteed to average like 10 yards a carry. So whatever.
Yeah, I'm glad the 49ers won because, well, I was glad the 49ers won because it made the entire division that much more muddy. And then the Cardinals, who, if we would have beat the Packers this week, they would be top of the division. They would be winning it. And unfortunately, they absolutely shit the bag. Kyler Murray, once again, I'm off the train. I'm on the train. I'm off the train. I'm on the train. It's terrible. It's terrible. We beat the 49ers, which I did not see coming. And obviously, I think the only reason we won is because the kicker got hurt. But I was like, this is a real opportunity for us to potentially lead the division. Whether we continue that trend throughout the rest of the season, I don't think that's possible. But all is to say, would have been nice to say at Week 7 or Week 6, we would be leading the division, right? Shit the bed against the Packers. This offense looks dilapidated. Marvin Harrison got hurt, and so that didn't help anything. But all is to say, like, this offense is so sporadic, and we've touched on this so many different times now, but it's so frustrating to watch this lack of offensive production for an offense that has some weapons on it. And I'm just like, what are we doing? Kyler Murray, they're trying to make it looks like they're trying to make him a pocket passer. And it's very frustrating because while I understand that you want to protect Kyler Murray, like, where's the play action bootlegs? Where's the things that open up the offense to be able to open up the offense and be able to utilize different assets within the offense instead of have Kyler Murray sit there? And our offensive line isn't great, but like, I'm so done. I'm back out. I'm sad again. I'm frustrated. And even if we continue to win, I don't know if I'm going to be excited for the rest of this year because I think our team's not very good.
Well, I don't know when the new Call of Duty comes out, but I'm pretty sure it comes out pretty soon.
I think.
Pretty soon. So can Kyler Murray get worse?
Well, he did get sponsored.
I know. I saw that. Or he did like an ad or something with him, which is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be
hilarious.
the guy, if you're going to be the guy who everyone says you suck when Call of Duty comes out, you might as well lean into it and just be a part of it. I think that's great. But it does make you a little nervous. Like, we've already seen that this offense can be rough. If Kyler Murray's going to be sleep deprived off of Black Ops 15 or whatever it is now, then you might be in for a world of hurt. Do we know when Marv is coming back? Is he out for an extended period of time? I didn't see anything.
He'll probably be out next week. We'll see. I'm not holding my breath, and honestly, it doesn't matter because we really haven't utilized Marv that much anyway. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. This whole thing's a wash. Gannon needs to get fired. At the very least, he needs to fire our offensive coordinator and get somebody that is competent in there to try and utilize the assets that we have on our team. And look, I'm not saying Michael Wilson and not Rondale Moore. I can't even think of the other guy's
Someone
name.
named Cedric, right? Cedric something?
Cedric Tillman is a
there?
wide receiver there.
Yeah.
Not
I
great.
know Cardinals ball.
Yeah. And then Trey McBride, which he was back in that. Yeah. Like, he's the only usable part of that offense, really, aside from maybe James Conner. So, very frustrating. Kyler Murray's, it's like the stock market. It's up and down, and it hurts me to say. But I think the real story here is the Packers because what the Packers, they're heating up, baby. The oven is heating up.
The big thing with the Packers, and we talked about this when Jordan Love first came back, is it almost looked like he wasn't fully healthy yet. They didn't have him under center a lot. Jordan Love sort of thrives in those play action type plays, and he wasn't able to play under center initially when he first came back. And now in this Cardinals team, it was like, oh, this is the Packers team that we've been waiting for since week 1, and the injury kind of derailed it initially, but you know, we've said it since the offseason that this Packers team is going to be one of the best teams in the NFL. And I think we saw the beginnings of that against a Cardinals team that, you know, has kind of been up and down. But I think by the end of the season, we're going to look at the Packers and say, yeah, this is kind of a powerhouse team. You know, unfortunately for
you think they're better than the Vikings?
No, I don't. And the thing is the Vikings are still kind of a question mark because we all know who Sam Darnold is, but they've looked unstoppable. And even when the offense struggles, the defense is incredible. So I think the Vikings are pretty much a complete football team, and really it's, their competition is going to be the Lions. They're in that conversation.
Sure.
But certainly the Packers are going to be right there and have an opportunity to find a lot of success this year.
Well, we were talking about the 49ers and the Seahawks. Let's just go back to this very quickly because the Seahawks, is Geno bad? I mean, he threw the ball 52 times. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbs, they combined for 19 carries for a total of 52 yards, so their run game really wasn't present. In week 5, Geno threw 40 times, and he led the team in rushing yards. The Seahawks are the bottom 5 in the NFL for rushing yards through 6 weeks, which I don't think anybody really had expected. I mean, Kenneth Walker, he's still young, but coming off last season, I think people expected a little bit more from the run game, which just hasn't been present.
Yeah, I'm going to look. I think they've been in, well, it looks like they got smoked by the Lions, obviously, but, they've been in every game that they've played. I mean, it's all been pretty close. I wonder how much of this is game script, because it's really weird to see how inefficient their running game has been. And Geno is just trying to especially over the last 2 weeks, he's trying to put the team on his back. Throwing the ball 90 some times over 2 games is ridiculous for Geno Smith, especially with Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet back there, who both theoretically should be usable running back options. And they can't get anything going. And when you watch the game, it was just so evident that they were just frustrated. Like, they were handing the ball off, it was going nowhere, and then Geno was just like, well, I guess I'll just try and handle it, and he looked frazzled. And this is a Seahawks team that I think we can both agree is above average. I think they should be a decent team. I'm not going to argue that they're going to be competing for any titles, but they should be able to compete in most of their games throughout the season. But they've got to get this offense figured out, because they look like they're just, it's like the meme of Charlie Day and the whiteboard. That's like what they're doing in the locker room, just trying to figure out anything that's going to work on the ground, and they just can't do it. So they're just flying by the seat of their pants, hoping Geno can save the day every week, and that's not going to be sustainable over the course of the season.
Well, they got rid of Shane Waldron went over to the Bears, right? And that was our offensive coordinator, and so he's over there now. And I kind of feel the same about the Bears. And the Bears did win this game against the Jaguars 35-16, but the Bears are kind of interesting. And before I guess we really delve into the Bears, let's talk about the Jaguars, because
gross.
Is Dougie P about to get himself fired here? Like, is he the next is he following Robert Saleh's footsteps in unemployment here very soon?
Well, there's 2 sides to this story, because if you ask Doug Pederson, which reporters did, he is totally confident that he is on this, or that the owners of the team are on his side, and he is not worried at all. At least that's what he says publicly. But everybody else is like, well, like, this is bad. This is a team, remember in the offseason, they came out and said, this is the most talented roster we've ever had. And they suck. They absolutely suck. And Trevor Lawrence has played decent in some games. In this game, he had receivers drop a ton of balls that should have been caught for, potentially touchdowns or big games. But it's just like they can't put anything together. And I've said this about other teams this year, but they just come out of the locker room and they look defeated. I mean, they just look like they hate their lives. Doug Pederson in all of his interviews is saying the weirdest shit. Like, he just doesn't understand what's going on. He can't figure out why they're not winning games. Like, I don't know. I think this is a big week for them, because obviously they're overseas.
Yep.
And most of the time we don't put a lot of stock into these overseas games. It's weird with sleep schedules. The turf is always weird. Like, it's just a lot of strange things about them that make us think, okay, I'm not going to take the result of this all the way through the season. But if they don't beat the Patriots, I think Dougie P is going to have some real problems on his hand, and we may see him get fired after next week.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm of the belief that he probably would have been fired this week if the team already wasn't just staying overseas for the week. Like, I think that's a legitimate conversation. And they're like,
wow, we don't want you to have to travel back with the team after we fire you.
No, I don't think he would travel back with the team. I think he would fly, like, they'd throw him on a commercial flight, an 18-hour layover. Like, they just be like, you're done.
Good luck.
I genuinely think that's why he has not been fired this week, is because they're overseas. They're like, well, he's already here. We're already all here. Whatever. Like, what do we have? They're 1-4. And this team, it has a couple different personnel, but, like, this team is the same team that was in the playoffs, 2 years ago? A year ago? 2 years ago? And, like, looked like they were showing promise. And, like, you're like, okay, like, The Jaguars could be something. They're, in the playoffs always get frisky, and we know that. But like when you make a playoff run like that, and then all of a sudden we're getting a 1-4 team not too long thereafter with mostly the same personnel, it's like, what is going on? It's bad.
But
and then you have the Bears.
I was gonna say we need to talk about the Bears because we've got some Bears fans within the LeatherBrainz, umbrella or whatever.
Yes.
And obviously, if you're a Bears fan right now, you're just ecstatic. Like you're like, okay, our team's coming together. The offensive coordinator who looked like a total dipshit in the first couple of weeks seems to be getting better. Caleb Williams is getting better. This defense is playing well. A lot of things to be excited about. But who have they played? And you can't control that. I mean, I'm not going to blame the Bears. They're smashing the teams that they should smash. Like they're not in these could go either way games. They're getting things done, which is all you can ask with the schedule. But are they good? I don't know.
We put out a tweet that was it caught a little bit of fire that was the attempt. And Chicago's 4-2, Scotty, but the teams that they have beat are the 1-3 Titans, the 1-4 Rams, the 1-4 Panthers, and the 1-5 Jaguars. So like you mentioned, you can't control the schedule, which I understand, and you should be winning these games, and you are. But are they fraudulent? And then you see people saying, I'm going to compare apples to apples here a little bit in rookie quarterbacks, because obviously Caleb Williams is a rookie quarterback, as we all know. But then you have the Commanders, right, who Jaden Daniels, I think, looks better than Caleb Williams throughout these first couple games here. But everybody's saying the same thing for the Commanders. It's like, okay, I'm going to read off the teams that the Commander has beat here, and you tell me which is a more difficult schedule, okay?
All right.
They beat the Giants, the Bengals, the Cardinals, and the Browns. So those are the teams that they have beaten. So also say, which schedule do you think is more difficult between the Commanders and the Bears throughout these first couple weeks in the wins that they've had?
I mean, they're both ridiculous. But at the end of the day, the Commanders, it is a more difficult schedule because, the Titans, Will Levis is just hell-bent. I mean, they're in every game, but he's hell-bent on handing every game to their opponents. The Rams are half a football team. The Panthers are half a football team for other reasons. And the Jaguars can't figure anything out. Like, they just have looked abysmal. So, I would argue that the Bears so far through 2024 have the easiest schedule of any team. Like it's not even just like, oh, they're doing pretty well. Let's nitpick. It's like, no, this is as easy as a schedule can get this year in the NFL. Now, that's not to say it's been nice to see from an eye test perspective, the Bears improving because we have seen that. We saw their offensive line, still are pretty bad, but they're light years ahead of where they were even just a couple weeks ago. Caleb Williams looks way more confident. Shane Waldron seems like he's got his guys kind of figured out, and I know they had that team meeting with Shane, telling
him he needs to be a better play caller.
Yeah, we got to switch something up because this isn't working, and it seemed to work out great. So all things are trending up for the Bears. So I'm not going to say that they're bad, but they have a lot left to prove throughout the season before we all hop on the bandwagon.
Sure. Well, and guess what, Scotty? It's going to come to a head here on October 27th because that's the next game that the Bears play, and they play the Commanders. So that's going to be a pretty fun one. I'm going to take the Commanders. I just think that the Bears' defense is legit, and I do believe that. But the offense, there's still some question marks there, and they are improving. Both teams are improving, and I just think offensively, I think Cliff Kingsbury is a little bit more of an offensive mastermind than Shane Waldron, and is utilizing his offense a heck of a lot better. So, but I'm sure we'll talk about that as we get closer to that game. Let's go over to some bad quarterback play with Deshaun Watson. Eagles, they struggled to win this game against the Browns 20-16, excuse me. Both teams go for a combined 8-26 on third down conversions. This Deshaun Watson contract is only looking worse and worse. Head coach Kevin Stefanski is still adamant that Deshaun Watson will be the starter being rolled out next week.
It's got to be above his head. It's got to be above his head.
It has to be.
There's no way Stefanski is making this decision. It's got to be hey, we paid this guy $1 billion. We have to play him. Because if it was anybody else, if this was any other quarterback, they'd be benched 2 weeks ago. Because this is, and you talk about easy schedules. Look at the Browns schedule in terms of the defenses that they're playing. Deshaun Watson should not be struggling this much. Not even close. This is terrible. And here's a fun fact for this Browns offense. Rodney McLeod is tied for the most touchdowns of any player on the Browns roster. And if you don't know who that is because you're a fantasy guy, It's because he's a defensive back, and he is tied for the most touchdowns of any player on this Browns roster. Like, this is abysmal. And I can't remember the stat, but it's been like, I don't know, like 10 years or something since a team has gone this number of games without scoring over 20 points or whatever it is. Like, it's just, it's meme after meme with this Browns team. It's just terrible. And if they have any hope at all for the future, they need to bench Deshaun Watson now. And it just doesn't seem like they're ever going to do it.
I've been trying to figure out the chess game that is being played, and honestly, I think the Browns are playing checkers. However, I do think that the reason that they haven't benched Deshaun Watson is first and foremost because of the money. I think they're tanking. I think they realize that Deshaun Watson's not the guy, but obviously no team is going to come out and say that they're tanking, right? And that's the players obviously dictate more so than anything else the whole tanking thing, because players are playing for contracts and players are playing for their next contract. Whether it's with that team or with another team, whatever, right? Like, so players are still going to give it their all because they have individual skin in the game. However, the ownership and maybe Kevin Stefanski a little bit, but I do think it's more ownership is saying, you know what, let's just keep rolling them out here. We have legitimate ground to stand on as far as giving us an argument, and it's because we paid this guy so much money. Because you're right, Scotty, they shouldn't roll Deshaun Watson out every single week because he's terrible. However, they're like, well, we're paying him all this money, so let's just keep paying him because we don't have any other option. Let's get a really high draft pick, and then let's go draft a quarterback with that pick. And so maybe that's what they're trying to do here. I don't know. But even Nick Chubb, who's slated to return here in the not-so-distant future, I don't think he's going to be enough to move the line for the Browns in a way in which makes them a favorable team in any sort of situation, as long as Deshaun Watson is standing under center.
Well, and here's the thing. If they were really tanking, which, you know, if I was in that position, I'd probably consider it too. But there's zero chance I'd be rolling Nick Chubb out right now. I would not put him in that position coming off of that ridiculous, terrible injury that he suffered. I would say, listen, man, just take your time. We're not trying to win these games anyway. So the fact that they're like, yeah, we're going to bring Nick Chubb out as soon as he's ready to go tells me, they want to win games. But you're just not going to do it with Deshaun Watson. And the schedule, as far as defenses that they play, does not get easier. It gets way harder. So unless we see some significant 180-degree turn from Deshaun Watson, I mean, this season is fucked. And this is a team that made the playoffs with basically a backup offense last year. Like, it is ridiculous that they're in this position. And, if any NFL fan was the GM for this team, we would have Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson in week 2.
100%. But once again, I mean, the contract for Deshaun Watson is much heftier than Russell Wilson. But I think this, in some people have, like NFL players have said, it goes so much further than just Deshaun Watson's like physical play, but it's above the shoulders is what some players were saying, which I've been saying for weeks now. Like, you watch Deshaun Watson play football and he looks uninterested. He looks like, I think he's just checked out. I mean, I've been saying this for weeks on the show. Like, he looks legitimately checked out of wanting to play football anymore. And I think Alan or you had even mentioned in a prior episode, like, would you want to go out there when everybody hates you and everybody knows like you're kind of a scumbag and everything that you've done? Like, and I'm not trying to defend Deshaun Watson because I do think he is a scumbag, but also to say, like, and I've said this, I wouldn't want to go to work every single day if everybody hated me and all the fans knew everything I had in my closet, like, legitimately. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. So he looks like he just doesn't care about the sport anymore, which is really unfortunate given how athletic he was when he was with the Texans. And I think that's largely the problem here, is like his cares for the game are done. And do you think there is a world in like if we see this again next week? Like, there's been talk about Kevin Stefanski potentially being on the hot seat. Is that a fair even argument to have?
No, not with as recently as he's won Coach of the Year. I think that everyone with a brain is recognizing this is not Stefanski's call. Like, he's just stuck between a rock and a hard place because he's not able to do anything about this. But, I mean, you're right. It's Deshaun Watson is a head case at this point in time. And, like you said, you can't really defend him, but it's hard to blame him for performing so poorly with just how much he's just the villain of the NFL. And especially you add on top of that, all this guaranteed money that he's had. It's not like he's motivated to spend extra time in the lab and figure it all out. He's like, yeah, whatever, I'm getting my paycheck. These guys hate me anyway. Fuck them. I'm just going to do my thing. And however it works out because I'm still going to be out, $200 million richer.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that like if we, when are we gonna? Are do you think there's a legitimate chance we see Jameis Winston? Because we're all kind of wanting it, but unless Deshaun Watson gets hurt, like, are they just gonna keep rolling this guy out, or is there a chance you think this season that Jameis Winston is actually they just finally benched Deshaun Watson?
You got to think there's a breaking point. I would have thought it would have happened already with just not just that they're losing games, but with how pathetic this offense looks. But there's got to be a breaking point. I mean, I do think that whenever Jameis, if that ever happens, whenever he gets the nod as the starter, that should be a national holiday. I think everyone should you should get like 3 days off of work just to worship Jameis Winston and not having to watch Deshaun Watson anymore. But I don't know. I mean, at this point in time, it's impossible to say what this front office is saying behind closed doors and what their end goals are. But what they're doing right now makes no sense at all.
Well, let's pivot this over to the Eagles and talk about things that I don't want to say don't make sense, but were certainly entertaining to watch as someone who has no skin in the game, and that being Nick Sirianni screaming at Eagles fans after they were chanting for his head and for him to get fired. Did you see this?
Yeah, I just want to take you back to a year ago when the Eagles walked into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs, and everyone was real excited for that because everyone likes to hate on the Chiefs.
True.
And Nick Sirianni, at walking off the field, was screaming at the Chiefs fans, talking shit, yelling in the tunnel, and everyone was like, yeah, get the Chiefs, whatever. Since that point, Nick Sirianni has been on a steady downward spiral in his own brain. He can't figure out what the fuck's going on. Like, he thought he was on top of the world at that point, and guess what? Some wire came loose because he decided to shave his head for some reason. Like, I don't know, he looked like a patient at an insane asylum, and then he's screaming at his own fans, who, by the way, allegedly, I don't know if this is actually true. I didn't see any videos of this, but I heard Eagles fans on X saying that there were chants of fire Sirianni during this game that they won, ultimately. But, like, he's screaming back at the fans and yelling at the fans, which is insane. I mean, he's acting like an insane person.
I think it's a match made in heaven. Like, I legitimately, I think it makes sense for him to be the Eagles head coach because Eagles fans are also kind of crazy. And I think most Eagles fans would actually kind of own that. And they'd be like, yeah, no, we know. Like, you think of a typical Philly person who lives in Philly and carries, like, the stereotypes that come along with that. It kind of checks out that Sirianni, like, when you think of a head coach that would scream at their fans, if you were to pick a location, I would say Philly would be a good place to do that because they're going to scream at him. He's screaming back. Like, that seems like a prototypical Philly thing to do. So I think I get what you're saying, but I think it's kind of just like a little match made in heaven between, like, it's a good fit for him.
I see what you're saying, but I think if there's one thing you have to know about being involved in Philly sports is that you must worship Philly sports. And if you are going to disrespect the fans of the biggest team in Philly, like, that's a tough way to keep your job. Like, this is a weird situation where they won the game, but obviously they're playing a Browns team that they should have beaten by like 40 points with how the Browns are playing. So they won the game, but it's kind of a disappointing loss. Like, nobody's real excited about it over there in Philly. And it's like, they're not going to fire him after a win. They're not going to fire Sirianni right now. But if they did, they'd be like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, everyone would understand. Like, they're not going to do it, but everyone's kind of like, nah, maybe they should. I think this is Sirianni's last year. You
do? Do you think he makes it through the whole season?
They're going to have to, if he doesn't make it through the season, it's going to be because they collapse like they did in 2023. If they collapse like that again, I do think there's a chance he doesn't. But ultimately, if they're a 500 team, I think he makes it through the season. And then it's like they both decide. Sirianni's like, yeah, I don't want to deal with this shit either. It's literally making me lose my mind. So let's just go our different directions. Yeah, like it's crazy. So I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up happening at the end of the year.
Okay. Alan is not here, but Scotty, he's thinking maybe Baker Mayfield for MVP. And the reason he's thinking this is because Baker leads the NFL in passing touchdowns with 15, with total touchdowns at 17. The Bucs came back being down 51-27.
No, that's how they finished the game. They were down at half.
They were down at half, and they finished the game 51-27. Baker Mayfield, what do we think? Like, is this the most Browns thing to happen to the Browns, where they let a quarterback go that is actually a half decent quarterback? And that's it's kind of weird to even say out loud. But Baker Mayfield has actually looked really good this year, or very usable. And last year he did as well, and that's why the Bucs signed him to a 3-year extension. But like, what do we think, Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, I'm a Baker Mayfield fan. I think it's fun to watch him play. I do think, Allen's saying MVP race. I think he's saying that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, maybe exaggerating just a tad. Because Baker Mayfield in this game played pretty well, but it's not like he was exceptional. I think that this is just a good Bucs team. So let's talk about Baker Mayfield for a second, because I do think with his personality and everything, everybody's rooting for him, kind of the underdog story. We do got to bring down our expectations a little bit, because in this game, Baker Mayfield, after taking a 17-point lead in the first quarter, threw back-to-back interceptions that led to the Saints coming back and actually leading at halftime. So Baker Mayfield threw 3 picks in this game, and, it's not like he played his best. He finished with a QBR of 52.1, which isn't terrible, but it's not like MVP numbers, right? And Chris Godwin and Sean Tucker, they also helped out Baker Mayfield a little bit.
Who's Sean Tucker?
He's the running back.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's not named Rashad White.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But those two players decided to take like 2-yard check down passes and take it for a total of 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they padded Baker's stats a little bit when Baker threw like a 2-yard pass, and then bam, all of a sudden it's a 50-yard touchdown. And then Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving combined for over 200 rushing yards in this game. So, I couldn't play quarterback in the NFL, but if I was going to play quarterback in the NFL, I would like to do it on a team that can rush for 200 yards, because that's a great way to make the quarterback position as easy as possible. So all this is to say, good for Baker Mayfield for, beating a Saints team that started a rookie quarterback for his first ever start and threw 3 interceptions. I mean, so like good for him, I guess. But we do need to temper the expectations on Baker a little bit, because he's not the next coming of Jesus Christ. He's just a fun quarterback to watch, and we can appreciate that for what it is without, calling him an MVP candidate.
Well, and it is also worth noting, Baker's now logged 3 games in 6 weeks where he has a QBR under 60. So 13.1 QBR and a terrible loss to the Broncos, which I didn't see coming. And then on the season, Baker is ranked behind Andy Dalton, Derek Carr, and Jalen Hurts in QBR. So, Alan, I hope your MVP comment is tongue-in-cheek, because I think that while Baker Mayfield is fun to watch, there's certainly more discussion that needs to be had before we start throwing the MVP conversation around.
Although Patrick Mahomes is behind all 4 of those quarterbacks in the QBR rating in 2024, and he's still topping the charts for likelihood to win MVP. So I don't know. I think people just assume Patrick Mahomes is going to turn everything around and be awesome again, but we haven't really seen it out of him in a couple of years now.
I think it's the dad bod is kicking in for old Patty. I think that's part of the problem. I'd like to talk about birthday presents, Scotty. You had a birthday a couple weeks ago, and this last week Jerry Jones had a birthday. He turned 82. So I'm trying to think of what better birthday present to get an 82-year-old stuck-up NFL owner / GM than getting blown out 47-9 against the Lions. Can you think of any birthday present better than that?
Yeah, only if you could, like, hypothetically, if you could do that instead of doing it at somebody else's stadium, if you could do it at your own stadium, that might make it pretty good. Yeah. Oh, and that's exactly what they did. Oh. And by the way, I don't know if you've seen all these memes. I know these have been going around for a while now, but the Dallas Cowboys stadium, where it's positioned just directly to look right into the sun, like Dak Prescott has to stare into the sun on half the drives at their home games. It's just like, who designed this? This is crazy.
Yeah, and in this game, I mean, the Lions... I think the thing to talk about here is Aiden Hutchinson, man, and that's why we packed those little snacks in as we were pouring one out for old Aiden Hutchinson. I saw that live. Aiden Hutchinson is my new favorite defensive player, or one of them, and he's been absolutely dominant since he's entered the league. He has been a great asset to that, and really kind of the heart of that defense for the Lions. And if you haven't seen it, go check us out on LeatherBrainz on X. The clip is there. They would not replay that clip again on live television.
And you shouldn't watch it. I mean, it's gross.
It is really gross. But if you're interested in that kind of nasty old stuff, go check it out. It was really sad, man. Like you could legitimately see his leg just like flop in 2 different directions when he collided. He didn't even really collide. He was trying to make a sack on the quarterback, and his teammate kind of ran into him. It was just a freak thing. It was. It was nobody's fault necessarily, but it was really sad, and he immediately had to have surgery. Like they carted him off the field. He immediately went to the hospital and had surgery. So like it was nasty.
Yeah, it was rough because I watched it live, but I didn't know, they didn't show the replay on TV.
Yeah.
But when he went down, you could just tell that he knew he was fucked. Like he took his gloves off immediately and just was like, this is all over. But I couldn't figure out like what had happened because it didn't look like anything unusual. Like it wasn't like the Nick Chubb injury where you're like, holy shit, he's gonna die. But he just knew immediately that it was over, and it's just devastating because he is not only the best defensive player on this Lions team, which has several good defensive players, but he's like kind of the heart and soul of the Lions team, of this Lions defense, and he brings that energy that Dan Campbell's trying to build, where he's just like go out and bite kneecaps or whatever. He is like the poster child for that, and so I'm interested to see. It's devastating. The Lions are a very good team. I think they're still going to be great, but this is like a huge loss for this Lions defense.
Very much so. It was sad to see, and I don't know what is wrong with the Cowboys. Like I legitimately, is it Dak? Because Dak does not look good. Is it the play calling? Is Mike McCarthy on the hot seat? And Jerry Jones was even asked, like, are you thinking about making a coaching change? And he said, absolutely not, which kind of tracks for Jerry Jones in the fact that he's just, I don't know what kind of dirty work McCarthy's doing behind the scenes with old Jerry, but something's working because he's still around, and he has been still around, and there's been chatter for the last year now about McCarthy being on the hot seat, and it's still, we're just going to keep rolling with McCarthy. But this offense looks terrible, and the defense doesn't look great either. I mean, you lose 47-9 against the Lions, who, I get it, the Lions are a good team, but the Cowboys, if you look at their roster and what they should have been this year, 47-9 is just abysmal. I really am struggling to figure out what's going on. Their run game's terrible. Yeah. Their run game's awful.
The whole team is just taking a big step back. They just can't put anything competent together. Dak Prescott just goes entire games where he just seems to forget CeeDee Lamb exists, or they're just not on the same page. And, when they're connecting, they're a great duo, and CeeDee Lamb can dice up anybody in the league, but it seems like there's 50% of the time they're just not at all on the same page at all. Just to underscore how bad this Cowboys offense has been, they have scored a total of 117 points in 2024. 60 of those points came from Brandon Aubrey, the kicker. More than half of the points that they have scored this season have been from their kicker, which is great for fantasy managers of Brandon Aubrey, but terrible for the Cowboys and everybody else.
That's embarrassing. Your kicker has scored over half your points in the game, or in NFL regular season. That's bad. And I do have to tip my hat to you, Scotty. You were correct about, last week we were talking about what was said, when CeeDee Lamb there was some verbal, and everybody was playing the read the mouth game with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott on last week's loss. And CeeDee Lamb actually came out and said exactly what you had said that he said. So congratulations to you.
Amen.
You are now you've been dubbed the mouth reader of LeatherBrainz.
Well, so. I've been dealing with tinnitus, a ringing in my ear, for most of my life. And so I've just picked up on reading lips. I'm just great at reading lips. So we could do this whole podcast in silence if you want. I can understand everything you're trying to say.
Well, I think that would be entertaining for us, but probably not entertaining for the rest of the listeners and or viewers. So we'll continue to talk, and you're just probably going to have to read my lips for the rest of the episode if that ringing
I'll turn
persists.
my headphones down.
Okay. NFC North is now the first division since realignment in 2002 to have all 4 teams with 4 wins through 6 weeks. So Vikings are 5-0, Lions are 4-1, the Packers are 4-2, and the Bears are 4-2. And we said before the season that this division was going to be the toughest division of football, which is currently tracking. We said it was going to be fun to watch, and it's currently shaping up that way. But of the 4 teams in the NFC North, which are you most surprised has looked this good despite all the circumstances that have enveloped all of these teams?
It's got to be Vikings, obviously. I mean, they're the top of this division, clear cut, being undefeated. And, we knew the Vikings. I also said in the offseason that whichever rookie quarterback shows up to this team is going to be the best rookie quarterback in the class. Now, I don't know if J.J. McCarthy would have been outperforming Jaden Daniels at this point, but the point of that was to say that this is a good team with a good coaching staff, and you can put pretty much anybody back there, and they're going to see some semblance of success. They're going to look competent, but I didn't expect them to be leading the Lions. I didn't expect them to be leading the Packers. Didn't expect them even to be leading the Bears. We also said going into the season that you blinked and all of a sudden the Vikings were the worst team in the division. And guess what? Sam Darnold did not skip a beat. He proved us all of us idiots wrong and said, hey, I've been screwed my whole career, not really playing for any competent teams. I got to play for the 49ers for like a week, and that was great. But if I could stick around for a good team or on a good team with a good coach, I can play football. And so far, he's been doing that. And when he slips up, like we saw in week 5, the offense doesn't look as good. Oh, they have one of the best defenses in football backing him up. So this Vikings team is legit. Sam Darnold, obviously, with his career, kind of still has a lot to prove. Through only 5 games, it's tough to say definitively that it's not really a fluke. But with every passing day, it's more and more not a fluke. And this is a good, legitimate team.
I'm going to ask you to, I don't know if you have your magic ball sitting next to you, your crystal ball to look into the future, but I want you to close your eyes for just a moment and see if you can picture that crystal ball here. Is Sam Darnold the starting quarterback for the Vikings going into next season?
That's an interesting question that I haven't considered. I've been focused on this season. I think there's a legitimate chance. I mean, obviously, I don't know what contract he signed. Did he sign just a year deal?
Yeah.
So they'd obviously have to re-sign him. J.J. McCarthy, with his injury, I assume is going to be fine and healthy by the start of next season. I'm going to say yes. And I think the reason is J.J. McCarthy missed out on his opportunity to get reps. They're going to treat him as a rookie next year. And Sam Darnold, they're going to re-sign him basically as a long-term backup. And I think that Sam Darnold is going to start the season next year. It's difficult to say that they're going to have this level of success to start the season in 2025. So I think at some point they're going to swap him in 2025. But I bet he does start the season as the starter.
And I asked this question, because I own J.J. McCarthy in Dynasty, and so it's been a lingering thought in the back of my mind. But I have been frequenting some different threads and spaces in the Vikings world. And this is a legitimate conversation for a lot of Vikings fans. It's like, if Sam Darnold continues to play great, do you almost Trey Lance JJ? And you don't even give him a chance. And we know the whole story with the 49ers and Brock Purdy, and this is a different situation, but it's similar in some ways where Sam Darnold's come in and actually been really usable, and he's looked pretty great aside from that game that you just mentioned. And I think these coming weeks are going to be very telling of what the future of Sam Darnold looks like for the Vikings. Now, I will say this. I think there's a legitimate chance that Sam Darnold has kind of revitalized his career in some ways where he can maybe go start for another team, because there are going to be teams that are looking for a quarterback. And I think that financially, I don't know if the Vikings are going to want to hang on to Sam Darnold, because if J.J. McCarthy can be better than Sam Darnold, or even in the realm of the same usage as Sam Darnold, we see what teams are doing with rookie contracts, where it's kind of, when it comes to a quarterback position, where if you can hit on a quarterback or at least have a very usable quarterback and you ride that rookie deal, that opens up the non-existent, not real cap space for these teams to go sign other players to surround that quarterback with to then make a run for it. So I think these next few weeks are going to be very interesting and are going to be a very clear indicator for the Vikings if they're going to continue with Sam Darnold. Because if he continues, let's write off the game that he didn't play great in, which was the week previous to their bye. You look at the rest of these games and you're like, oh, Sam Darnold is like, I don't. It's weird to say MVP conversation, but he's played very good football, and it would make it a very hard conversation to have for the Vikings organization to sit there and say, do we let this guy walk, or do we play him, or what do we do, and what does our future look like? Because we have an unproven rookie sitting on our bench that's really gotten no playing time whatsoever. He hasn't gotten any playing time whatsoever. So it's something to keep in mind, and I let's put a bookmark in this, and I think we're going to revisit this in a few weeks, because in the event that Sam Darnold does play really well, I think there's a legitimate chance that we could be having a very real conversation about his future with the Vikings.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because, at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to how he finishes the season and what a new contract is going to be worth. Because, like you said, there are going to be teams who are going to need a quarterback, and the question is, we know the Vikings' long-term plan is to transition to J.J. McCarthy, so how much are they willing to spend on a short-term Sam Darnold situation? And also, Sam Darnold's agent has got to be, rubbing his hands together. Holy shit, we got the whole world in front of us right now. So I don't know. I guess that's a valid point. So we'll have to just wait and see if he continues to show out like this. It's going to be tough for them to re-sign him. But even if if he's assuming he's not going to be worth a ridiculous contract, obviously he's played well enough for the Vikings to be like, okay, we want this guy on our team, starting or not. We want him as an option for us.
Sure. But then the other thing that kind of plays into that is and once again, we're going to bookmark this, but I'll conclude with saying that could also muddy up that room, because if J.J. McCarthy comes out and through 4 weeks doesn't look great, like, are Vikings fans going to be calling for a swap? And then what does that do for his ego, and what does that do for his development, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So put a bookmark in it. We'll come back to this in a couple weeks once we see kind of how Sam Darnold plays. But let's go over to the Chargers and the Broncos, Scotty, your division. The Broncos win this game 23-6, or excuse me, the Chargers beat the Broncos 23-16. Are the Chargers good now? Has Harbaugh came in and fixed all their issues, do you think?
No. I'm so sick of this conversation, bro, because we keep having it already through this short number of weeks, because all the teams in the AFC West that aren't named the Kansas City Chiefs are ass. They suck. Right, and I know people on the Chargers side just expected the Chargers to flip a switch with Jim Harbaugh and all of a sudden they'd be good. And certainly there have been times where they've looked better than they have in recent years, which is good. They're moving in the right direction. The Broncos, they're fucking ass. Like, we know that. But as I said a few weeks ago, we're going to get these like glimmers of hope from these fan bases as these terrible teams all play each other and they say, hey, we looked pretty good against the Broncos, or we looked pretty good against the Raiders. And people start saying, oh, maybe this team's better than we thought. No, they're just playing over and over again all these teams that are fucking ass. And that's just the way it is. So I hope that Jim Harbaugh revitalizes this organization and they move in the right direction. I hope that Bo Nix is the answer in Denver. I hope that the Raiders figure out their quarterback situation and we have a really competitive division. But right now, they're just not there. So these teams are just not good yet. And every single week, we're going to come in and pick one of these teams and say, oh, they actually looked pretty good this week. Are they good now? No, they're still not good. And at the end of the season, they're still not going to be good.
Well, and we play this game with the Bears and the Commanders, so let's play it with the Chargers and the Broncos. And the Chargers' wins this year are the Cowboys, the Raiders, and the Panthers. So the Cowboys, as we previously have discussed, are absolutely atrocious right now. Raiders don't have a quarterback. Panthers kind of have no quarterback, but maybe Andy Dalton, but probably not. And they also suck. And then the Broncos, they did beat the Bucs, which I think is a pretty good win for them.
That's Baker Mayfield's 13 QBR game. Like, that offense just completely forgot how to play football. And that's not taking anything away from them. It's a win. A win's a win. I agree. But we didn't see them compete with the high-level offense and high-level defense that we traditionally see from the Bucs.
Fair. Broncos beat the Jets, which once again I think is another decent win for them. I think the Broncos wins are certainly stronger than the Chargers, and then the Broncos beat the Raiders, which, I mean, the Raiders, as I mentioned, have no quarterback. So, also say, I think the Broncos wins are just a little bit better than the Chargers at this point. That's not to say that they're anything great, but if I was to compare the two, I think the Broncos wins are certainly a little bit stronger than the Chargers at this point.
Yeah, the Broncos, the big thing with them is I know Bo Nix is a rookie, so you kind of expect this inconsistency, but there are some games where he comes out and he looks like Will Levis, and then some games he comes out and he looks like a very competent, usable quarterback. So we have to see which one of those is the real Bo Nix, and we have to see if this offense is going to string together some competent plays over the course of several games throughout the season, or if they're just going to be kind of hot and cold. It depends on the weather. It depends on if it's windy. Like, it depends on what mood Sean Payton is in. Either of those options are viable at this point for the Broncos. So if I'm a Broncos fan, obviously I'm encouraged, but it's not like I'm getting my hopes up after any of these wins.
Sure. And the last thing to note here is Jim Harbaugh almost had a heart palpitation / heart attack / whatever was going on right before the game started. He himself went into the blue medical tent, walked into the tunnel, and was not present for the game as he had some heart issues. So, not a good look for old Jimmy Harbs.
They say if you pop an edible, sometimes that THC can raise your heart rate and then also cause like panic attacks, freak you out. I think maybe Jim Harbaugh is out there popping some Delta 8s or Delta 9. Oh, I guess it's just legal, probably in California or Denver. So, yeah, he probably showed up and was like, hell yeah, let me just get some weed, and then didn't realize the potential side effects. He was like, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Maybe. Well, and it was kind of interesting because his brother, who plays for the Ravens, was in a presser and left the presser to go get on the phone and because he heard his brother was like potentially having a heart attack. So just something to note. It was interesting.
John Harbaugh, good brother. Good brother,
hey,
John.
Write that down. Put it down. John Harbaugh, great brother. Let's go to the Bengals because I know you don't like the Bengals, and the Bengals are kind of like it's not a rivalry with the Chiefs, but it's kind of a rivalry with the Chiefs, and it for me as an unbiased guy here, I do think it's a rivalry. Whether you want to admit to that as far as like.
Well, the Bengals, Joe Burrow owned the Chiefs in Arrowhead several times. He's, I think, the only quarterback to beat Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead 2 or 3 times, whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think this year so far the rivalry has been less than exciting, but I would agree.
Yeah, and the Bengals barely beat the Giants this week, and the Giants didn't even have their star wide receiver Malik Neighbors. So, the Bengals, I just don't understand what is going on. They are a must-win team at this point if they want to even try and contribute or get to the playoffs, and barely beating the Giants. You could look at this in 2 different veins. Are the Bengals really bad, or are the Giants actually not as bad as we thought they were?
I think both are true, actually. I think the Giants have looked semi-competent. Daniel Jones has not been the worst quarterback in football. Maybe Deshaun Watson has just lowered our standards so much that we're like, wow, this guy, he's
There's
a
couple
star.
names. There's a couple quarterback names that stick out that I think are worse than Daniel Jones that are currently starting quarterbacks.
I agree. And I think Daniel Jones, again, his biggest problem has just been the structure of this team. He's had no weapons. They've had no offensive line. And that was evident even in this game. We'll talk about them more in a second. But Daniel Jones just was asked to put this team on his back like he always is. And especially without Malik Neighbors, that was just put into hyperdrive. But the Bengals, their problem is their offense looks really good some weeks and really bad some weeks. Their defense looks fine some weeks and really bad some weeks. So the 2 games that their defense put together a complete game was against the Patriots and then the Giants, which we know those offenses aren't, known for scoring a ton of points. But those are the 2 games that the Bengals defense played decent. And in both those games, the Bengals offense just shit the bed. And then in every other game, the Bengals offense is like, hell yeah, like this looks pretty good. And the defense just gives up 50 points. Like they can't put it together. And, we've seen the Bengals struggle early in the season for several years now. It's not, you can't use that as an excuse because at some point you can't take 2 months off the season and expect to compete for Super Bowls. Like you have to come out ready to play. Mm-hmm. But that does leave a little bit of room for, okay, maybe they do figure this out. We know how explosive and powerful this offense is with Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, right? They can put up points in any game against any opponent. It's just a matter of, is their defense going to shit the bed every time their offense scores points? And if that continues to happen, this team is not going to sniff the playoffs.
So maybe we kind of just looking at this from taking a step back and looking at it, you expect the Bengals to win in a game where they're playing against high-powered offenses because it's going to be a shootout, and then when it comes to the games that they should win, maybe bet against the Bengals because they can't figure it out.
At this point in time, as good as the Bengals offense has potential to be, I'm never going to feel confident that their defense is going to be able to stop anybody because obviously this game, was a low scoring game. But if there's an offense that they're playing that doesn't have Daniel Jones and no receivers or Jacoby Brissett and no receivers, you have to expect whoever they're playing to put up a lot of points. And that's just based on what we've seen so far. That's just the way it's going to go for them. We have to see them obviously play more games before we come to a final conclusion, but I have no confidence at all in this defense whatsoever.
Well, let's talk about the Giants because Brian Dable, he decided that the Giants are going to win or Daniel Jones is going to absolutely die trying. 72 offensive snaps this last week against the Bengals, okay? Danny Dimes threw or rushed 52 times. He took hit after hit in an attempt to really just put this team on his back. And I don't know if you know this guy. Daniel Jones is not Lamar Jackson. I don't know if were you aware of that?
Yeah, I mean, you might call him like Walmart Lamar, or maybe just what's a stereotypical white town? Uptown Maine Lamar. Like he's just kind of vanilla, but he's got some moves. But yeah, certainly he's not Lamar Jackson.
Okay, well, I wanted to bring that up because I don't think Daniel Jones is great, and I think that we've all come to that conclusion. But I don't think Daniel Jones is the full issue here, and I do think Daniel Jones. I've been saying this for a few weeks now. I think if he continues this, he is going to be the starter next year because they're just not going to have any other options. And I also think There are, like I mentioned, there are other quarterbacks out in the NFL that are starting right now that I think are way worse than Daniel Jones.
Yeah. Daniel Jones is he is the Sam Darnold of a few years back, where he's got potential. He could be competent, but they just don't have the organization around him to allow him to reach his full potential. They don't. And Daniel Jones can look terrible some plays and look good other plays, but ultimately, especially when Malik Neighbors isn't in this lineup, we've seen the impact that he's had for this offense. Like there's just no options for him. He's just out there running for his life. In this game, like you said, he ran through or rushed 52 times out of 72 offensive snaps, which means, they gave their running backs 20 carries, which isn't terrible, but this is a team that isn't getting any efficiency on offense, and they're asking Daniel Jones to just run for his life or just huck the ball to anybody with hands, which isn't very many people on the Giants. So they're just in a bad spot, and I don't know what they do. Part of me thinks, I hear what you're saying about, if he doesn't play too bad, they don't have a high draft pick, maybe they just got to roll him out again. Part of me thinks, they have an out this year with this contract. I almost think they're just going to wipe the board. They're just going to wipe the slate clean. They're going to fire the GM. They're going to fire the head coach. They're going to fire Daniel Jones, and they're just going to start from scratch and say, hey, listen, this was an experiment. It failed. We're going to do whatever it takes to work our way back into a competent football team. And I don't like that because, Joe Schoen did make some good moves in the offseason in terms of their rookies. They have some talent there. Brian Daboll, I think we both agree, is a good head coach. Daniel Jones has potential, but it's going to be difficult to sell to Giants fans that they're almost to the point of being a competent football team with what we've seen in recent years. And I think it's almost an easier sell to say, we're just going to wipe the slate clean and start over.
I have two questions. I'll start with the Brian Daboll question. And I think this is kind of an interesting question, and only time will ultimately tell for sure. But I think that, or I'm curious to know if you think that as we progress in the NFL and as time goes on, are we going to see more stability from an offensive or defensive coordinator and not leaving their positions and staying with teams in order to try and find success? And I bring this up because, we know that Brian Daboll was the Josh Allen whisperer, and that was the year that Josh Allen looked the best, and that was the year that the Bills were really clicking on offense, and then he had an opportunity to go be a head coach and took it with the Giants. And now we see something like Ben Johnson with the Lions, who he was very sought after this last season. He said, hey, I'm not going to leave unless there's a really good opportunity for me. I'm going to stay here. And so in some ways, does that not increase the coordinator's stock as a head coach if they're continuing to find success? Because the Lions are still clicking at a really high level. Ben Johnson's been doing a great job with them. And if Brian Daboll were to stay with the Bills and continue to improve upon the success that they were already finding, his stock would increase, and then maybe he'd go to a more favorable team. So do we think that could be a potential trend as the NFL progresses or moves forward with some of these coordinators?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, ultimately you're asking these coordinators to have almost superhuman levels of reflection and introspection. Like, they have to look at themselves and say, listen, I think the real issue is when you have a lot of success as a coordinator and you've been coaching football your entire life and someone says, hey, we think you would be the best fit for us to be our head coach. That's a difficult thing to turn down. Ben Johnson is the exception, not the rule there. And, it usually comes with a big pay raise. It usually comes with an opportunity for more name recognition. I mean, you and I are weird. We can name a lot of offensive coordinators, but how many NFL fans can do that? Not a lot of NFL fans are real familiar with all the offensive coordinators in football. So you're looking for name recognition. You're looking for relevance. They want a legacy just like anybody else who's playing this game or coaching this game. So I'm skeptical to think that we're going to have a large number of coaches that just say, unless you give me the best possible situation, I'm not leaving my coordinator spot, when they feel like they've had success and they have an opportunity to go make a statement for an organization and be kind of the main guy. So I don't think so. I think we're going to see more of the same. And the other thing to consider is just how, political it is in terms of like firing someone like Brian Daboll or firing someone like an offensive coordinator. I'd say 70% of it is how the team is performing on the field. The other 30% is entirely political. You have to sell these messages to your fan base. You have to sell these messages to, GMs are also trying to keep their jobs. So they're trying to make these moves and make it feel like they're not stagnant. So it's just all kind of a mess. And I do think this turnover is just something that's going to exist in the NFL for a long time.
It will be interesting, but only time will tell for sure. Scotty, it's time to do some kickoff karaoke. So I'm going to kind of explain for anybody who is just joining us, and this is your first episode with LeatherBrainz. Actually, I'm so sorry. I had one more question regarding the Giants and Daniel Jones. So I did want to ask that before we did Kickoff Karaoke. We're going to play a game, Scotty, and you know how much I love these games, right? This is 6 weeks into the NFL, right? We're approaching week 7. So through 6 weeks of NFL football, I'm going to ask you, would you rather have Daniel Jones or this other quarterback? And obviously, this is just 6 weeks. So I want you to understand that what you are saying now will not have any reflection by the end of the season because we are
don't hold me to it. You mean I can say whatever I want?
100%.
No repercussions.
That is what I'm saying.
Cool.
Okay, you ready? So Daniel Jones, of course, is the quarterback in question. Would you rather have Daniel Jones or Will Levis?
Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones or Trevor Lawrence?
Trevor Lawrence.
Daniel Jones or Geno Smith?
Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold?
People are going to hate me for saying that, by the way. That was a tough one. But
Mm-hmm.
I think Geno Smith is a little bit overrated. I think he's been playing well, and he's made a lot, made a lot of plays with. I don't know. I think the Seahawks offense is just good, though. I think he's just kind of a role player quarterback that's found some success with a decent offense. This year notwithstanding because they can't run the ball at all. But I just think Daniel Jones adds another layer to an offense if he had competent pieces around him that he could take it to the next level. Whereas Geno Smith, I think we've kind of seen his ceiling. So just to explain that so nobody crucifies me.
That you might still get crucified, but hey,
I'm sure I will. It is what it is.
You can say whatever you want. We already established that.
Oh, that's true.
Daniel Jones or let's keep it in New York, Aaron Rodgers.
Well, Daniel Jones just for the future. I think Aaron Rodgers is gonna not be playing football for much longer, especially if they keep sucking.
Yeah, no, they don't look great. Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold?
Sam Darnold.
Okay.
Easy.
All right, and last one: Daniel Jones or Baker Mayfield?
Baker.
It's kind of interesting because, like, if we were having this conversation 2 years ago, this conversation would probably be very different. Maybe even,
100%.
A year ago, probably. This would be a very, Sam Darnold's a backup. Baker Mayfield is not, Baker Mayfield is playing for, an extension, all these different things. And Daniel Jones was like, okay, he's Daniel Jones. I signed him to, and people are choosing Daniel Jones over this. And Sam Darnold, that one is wild alongside Geno. So it's all to say, this is an evolving and ever moving landscape that is the NFL. So that'll conclude the game. Let's go over to Kickoff Karaoke. As I mentioned, if this is your first time here, I'm going to explain Kickoff Karaoke. Every week, Scotty Allen and I are picking 4 games against the spread, okay? And we are keeping record of this, and whoever loses the most games has to sing the national anthem live to all you brainiacs right before the Super Bowl. So, current standings. Scotty is 15 out of 24. He is in first place. Allen is 12 out of 24. That's a good 50%er right there. And then I am in last place with 9 out of 24. So do not listen and or bet with me. If you are going to do it with anybody, at this point, it is Scotty.
A lot of season left. I might screw you over plenty of times by then.
I'm hoping so because nobody wants to hear me sing. We will go to our first game, the Lions at the Vikings for week 7. The Vikings are 1.5 point favorites. I will start with you, Scotty, since A, Allen is not here, and B, you are winning.
Honestly, this one is a toss-up, but I've been riding high on the Lions. I think this is a great football team, just all the way through. I mean, they just have they don't have any weaknesses. Losing Hutch really sucks for their defense. We're going to have to see how that impacts them, but until we see that totally demoralizes the entire team, I've been betting on the Lions. It's done me well in Kickoff Karaoke so far. I'm going to keep doing it. I think they hand the Vikings their first loss.
Okay. Allen's not here, but he put the Fighting Dan Campbell's. So he's rolling the Lions as well, and with good reason because I am also doing that. So I think we're all in agreement that the Lions are going to win this game. I do think the Hutch injury is a really big. I think with Hutchinson there, I think the Lions could be favored, but unfortunately with his loss on the season, I think that Vegas obviously thinks that the Vikings are going to take this one. I still think it's going to be the Lions.
And what's more interesting about this matchup, honestly, I know we want to talk about Hutch versus this, or what would have been Hutch versus this Vikings offense, but I'm way more interested to see this Lions offense versus the Vikings defense, because this is a clash of titans. This Lions offense, after hanging a ridiculous number of points on the Cowboys, they look unstoppable. Ben Johnson is just going to draw up 17 different trick plays, and 5 linemen are going to score touchdowns. But we've seen that this Vikings defense looks completely impenetrable. Like, they just look like maybe the best defense in football. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out and how these two titans kind of go back and forth.
I agree with you. And one more point here on the Lions-Vikings game. The Lions, Jameson Williams, man, like, you talk about I don't want to say a resurgence, because he didn't have a resurgence to begin with, but he's looked really good, and he's finally finding a role in this offense, and I think that really gives them another tool in their tool belt to continue to perform at a high level, because Amon-Ra St. Brown is not the focal point of this offense at this juncture. Not to say he is not still an elite upper echelon wide receiver, but they're getting other pieces involved. Last year we saw it was Laporta, and Jameson Williams has been very, very usable alongside with their very strong run game.
That's what's interesting too, because when I look at Jameson Williams as a Chiefs fan, I see Xavier Worthy. They're very similar players in the fact that they can take the top off of anybody. They're shifty enough to do some intermediate routes, but mostly they're like, hey, we're going to hit you on ridiculously long pass plays after checking to or faking to 3 other options. But this is what a team can do with a player like Jameson when they have so many weapons. I mean, this is just a team with weapons everywhere, and you have to worry about Laporta. You have to worry about Amon-Ra. You have to worry about Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, they have weapons everywhere. It's impossible to cover everybody. And when you've got a guy that can just take the top off, he's going to get open a lot. And defenses are going to have to adjust to that. I think as the season goes on, you're going to see a transition back to Amon-Ra, back to Laporta as they start prioritizing JMO. But until then, JMO's going to eat. And that's the same thing that we're seeing out of Kansas City.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is going to be a really fun chess match of football this week. That's my game of the week, and I'm very excited for it. Alongside with the fact that they're division rival, like they're in the division, they're both competing for the top spot. So I think that'll be great. We're going to go over to the Texans at the Packers. Allen will go first here, as the Packers are 2.5-point favorites, and Allen has chosen the Packers as 2.5-point favorites to win this, or cover the spread rather. Scotty, who are you taking?
Yeah, this might be a boring segment of Kickoff Karaoke. I'm also going to go with the Packers. I think that, as we said last week, obviously it's a significant jump, no offense, to go from the Cardinals to the Texans, but the Texans have looked not as high-powered as maybe we had hoped so far. Anyway, I think they're still a very, very good team, but when you have a Packers team that is just now hitting their stride, they're playing in Lambeau, it's just difficult for me to bet against them. So I think Vegas, probably knows what's up on this one. I'm going to go with them.
And once again, I'm going to also roll with the Packers. I think Nico Collins being out certainly is a huge detriment to that Texans offense. And admittedly, even before, Nico was the heart and soul of this offense as far as scoring production and moving the ball down the field. So losing him was a huge blow for them. But regardless, I don't think the Texans have looked nearly as great as what we expected them to start the season. And that's not to say they're a bad team, but they haven't taken that step forward to really be an elite team at this juncture. And like you mentioned, I think the Packers, they are kind of hitting their stride. Jordan Love's getting healthy, and I do expect them to cover that spread. I agree with Vegas there. We're going to move to the next game, the Chiefs at the 49ers. Now, I would love for Allen to be here so you guys could have some very in-depth conversation about this, but you went first, and then Allen went first on the second game, so I'm going to go first here on this game. The Chiefs are 1-point favorites. Okay, so there's not really any room for error. Vegas doesn't really know who's going to win this game. I'm going to take the 49ers, Scotty. And every time I bet against the Chiefs typically win. So congratulations to you both, because I'm losing and will probably continue to lose. But also to say, I haven't seen the Chiefs really at an elite level this year. And that's in really all aspects. And granted, look, they're undefeated. They're doing great. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. They're always going to find a way to get it done. And I do believe that. But also say, they haven't really looked great. And that's really, Patrick Mahomes has not looked incredible like he typically has throughout his career thus far. And I think the 49ers are still humming. I think they're great. They have a lot of talent around them. And I do think that the 49ers are going to win this game.
Yeah, this game makes me very nervous. If it was at Arrowhead, I would feel a lot more comfortable with it. But because it's over in Cali, here's the thing. I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I'm going to go with the Chiefs because our defense is phenomenal. you say that the Chiefs haven't looked great, and you're right offensively, but defensively, the Chiefs have looked incredible. And we're dealing again with a 49ers team without their best weapon on the field. They're like 7 running backs deep right now on the depth chart. So I am confident that we're going to see kind of a muddy, low-scoring game here unless the Chiefs magically decide to figure it out. They played pretty well last week, actually. The Chiefs' offense looked better last week than they have all season, and that's without Rashee Rice, which is surprising. But ultimately, I think we're going to get a relatively low-scoring game, and I'm just crossing my fingers that the Chiefs can pull it out because this 49ers team is obviously good. They've been a staple of the NFL for several years now, and they're playing down a few men, and that's going to make a difference. But ultimately, I think it's still going to be close. Hopefully, the Chiefs win.
Okay. Alan's also got the Chiefs. I mean, you guys are Chiefs fans, so you got to support the team. But admittedly, I think this is even Vegas knows this is a hard game to call. So last game of the week, the bird game of the week. It's Seahawks versus the Falcons. Falcons are 3-point favorites. Alan will go first here. He is taking the Falcons. Scotty, who are you taking?
I'm riding the Falcons, baby. I've been riding the Falcons. I still think this team has not reached their full potential yet. Obviously, we saw this offense look incredible. When they decided to sort of uncork Kirko Chains and let him throw the ball around a little bit and stop with all this just zone read bullshit. And now that they've done that, and teams realize, hey, this guy can actually throw it. And by the way, Kyle Pitts is actually good. I know people have been pretending he's not, but Kyle Pitts is actually good. He's a weapon that the defense has to respect. And they have several weapons. Darnell Mooney is a weapon the defense has to respect. And so I think what we're going to see is the Seahawks be a little bit worried that they're going to Kirk Cousins is going to dice him up a little bit. And we're going to see Bijan actually have a good game. And Tyler Algier look efficient as hell. And I think we're going to see that all kind of come together. The Seahawks, like I said before, they've first of all got to figure out their running game, but the Seahawks just look kind of frazzled. They don't look like they're going to be competing at the highest level right now, and that could all change after this week. But ultimately, I'm very high on the Falcons and what their ceiling is, and I don't think we've seen that yet.
I am also taking the Falcons, and I would like to point out, you mentioned Kyle Pitts. You remember the agreement we had where I have gotten off the Kyle Pitts no matter what train. I'm standing at the station watching the laps go around, and Kyle Pitts has to get 10 points in fantasy consistently through 4 weeks before I will get back on that train. Scotty, he did it again this week. So in week 5 against Tampa, he put up 15.8 points. And this week against Carolina, he put up exactly 10 points. So if he can do it again against a Seahawks team and then do it again for Tampa, I'll ride the train with you, baby. But right now, it's getting a little warmer. I'm kind of interested to see what happens here. But ultimately, you talk about the Falcons. I do agree with you. I think offensively, we haven't seen their ceiling yet, and I don't know at what point we say, you know what, the Falcons are the Falcons, and
yeah.
Maybe that's after this week. Maybe we still give them a little bit more time, but like. We expected the Falcons to be great this year, and offensively, they've clicked at times, and they've shown, I mean, obviously last week was a hell of a performance across the board for the entire team, but then they come out against Carolina, who we all know is not a good team, and they barely scrape it by, and it's like, what's going on here? You put up a hell of a performance in primetime against Tampa, and then we get this against the Panthers of all teams. So I want to see it, and I haven't seen it consistently, and I'm not talking about Kyle Pitts. I'm just talking about the offense in general. It's like, where is their ceiling? Is this their ceiling? And I think here in the coming weeks, we're really going to find out, like, are the Falcons just the Falcons, or will they continue to take those steps, and will we see more of that elite performance like we did against the Bucs?
Yeah, it was certainly disappointing to watch. I wish they would have beat up on the Panthers a lot more. But ultimately, we also have to remember these are all professional football players, so it really is any given Sunday, and you can't expect a team to look down. The Chiefs have won several Super Bowls now, looking terrible in many games throughout the season. So we just need a larger sample size. I think when you're looking at the roster, you look at it on paper, this Falcons team has potential to be awesome, and we also have to remember that we're relatively early on in the season with a quarterback who's brand new to the system and a new head coach. Like, there was a lot of turnover in this organization, and so it makes sense that it might take them a little bit. So I'm still holding out hope, but you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, we might end the season saying, oh, the Falcons are just the Falcons, and it is what it is.
Time shall tell, my friend. And Alan's also taking the Falcons, so the only deviation that we have for Kickoff Karaoke this week is me taking the 49ers. So not super exciting, but maybe I could start creeping back up, climbing that ladder a little bit, and maybe Alan or you by the end of the season could be singing the national anthem instead of myself.
I've been practicing in the shower just in case.
Oh, gosh, I would love to hear that. That's it. That's all the time we got. We are going to get out of here. But before we do, I do just have to state to every single Brainiac out there, go check out LeatherBrainz.com. I am telling you, there are articles every single day over there. They're great articles written by our team of writers that we have, whether it be betting. We have a couple different writers writing about covering the spread. We have player props of the week. We have all that good stuff. So go check that out. And if you are interested in any sort of NFL analysis or breakdowns, we also have all that kind of stuff over there too. So leatherbrainz.com, go check it out and put your email in for the newsletter. It is an absolutely free newsletter. It is not out yet, but if you want to get primed for when that is ready to hit inboxes, it's an easy way to do so. So go check that out, leatherbrainz.com. I appreciate all the writers we got over there. They're doing tremendous work. Scotty, I appreciate you doing this with me here today. It has been an absolute joy. Let's get the heck out of here. We are
This is our cult.
out.
This is our team. We bleed blue. This is our cult. Whether win or lose, we love them. For the shoe, Colts Fort. Let the world hear us now. This is our team. Go Colts.